Welcome back to the Review the Audit channel. You know we love taking these deep
Not
dives
absolutely.
into the stuff that really matters, and
Yeah,
today is no exception.
definitely not.
We are looking at a case down in Florida that has sparked a lot of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
A legally blind man, Jim Hodges, had a run-in with the police while he was walking home on Halloween back in 2022. And the legal analysis of this encounter from the civil rights lawyer on YouTube is really fascinating.
It is. And you know what's interesting here? This encounter starts with something as simple as a cane mistaken for a gun, but it opens up this whole Pandora's box of legal issues, particularly when it comes to police conduct and citizens' rights.
Okay, so paint the picture for our listener. What exactly happened?
All right, so picture this. It's Halloween night, and Jim Hodges, a legally blind man, is walking home. He has a foldable cane in his back pocket. A police officer sees him and mistakes the cane for a gun.
I can see how that could happen, especially in a dimly lit situation. But it's what happens next that really raises some questions, right?
Right. The officer approaches Hodges, and there is some initial tension. Hodges refuses to provide ID, arguing that the officer doesn't have a valid reason to stop him. And this is where we jump into the first big legal concept, reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable suspicion. Now, isn't that the cornerstone of any legal police stop? Like, they can't just detain you for no reason, right?
Exactly. The Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable search and seizure. And the lawyer in the video makes the point that for a police stop to be legal, the officer needs to have a reasonable suspicion that the person is committing or is about to commit a crime.
So in this case, the officer's suspicion stemmed from seeing what she thought was a gun. But here in Florida, things get a little complicated because of our open carry laws, don't they?
Absolutely. Florida law allows for open carry of firearms under certain circumstances. And the lawyer actually cites a relevant case here, Kilburn versus State from 2020. That case clarified that briefly and openly displaying a firearm isn't automatically illegal in Florida, unless it's done in a threatening manner.
Wait, so just seeing someone with a firearm isn't enough for a police stop?
Not necessarily, especially in Florida. You see, the Kilburn case highlighted that Florida has over 2 million concealed carry permits. That means roughly 1 in 7 adults over 21 could legally be carrying a concealed weapon. So the officer's suspicion, just from seeing something that could be a gun, might not hold up legally, particularly given Florida's gun laws.
Wow, that's interesting. So even if the officer initially had some level of reasonable suspicion, you're saying it should have disappeared once it was clear that Hodges was holding a cane and not a gun.
Precisely. That's where the lawyer's argument gets even stronger. You see, the officer's initial suspicion, based on a possible firearm, should have evaporated once it was established that the object was, in fact, a cane. Yet the encounter continued.
Here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because even though the officer now knows it's a cane, things escalate. And according to the legal analysis, this escalation might stem from Hodges exercising his right to free speech.
Right. It seems like the officers were about to let Hodges go, but then he criticizes them and even mentions holding them accountable for their actions. And this is where things take a turn.
Almost like they were thinking, how dare you question us?
That's the implication. The lawyer argues that Hodges' criticism might have triggered a retaliatory response from the officers, leading to his arrest. It raises a crucial question. Was Hodges arrested not because of a legitimate legal reason, but because he dared to speak out against the officers' actions?
That's a heavy accusation, and it definitely adds a layer of complexity to this whole situation. We're seeing potential legal issues around reasonable suspicion, open carry laws, and now even the First Amendment right to free speech.
It's a perfect illustration of how a seemingly simple encounter can spiral into a complex legal battle with far-reaching implications.
We're just getting started with this deep dive, and already things are fascinating. For our listener, if you want to learn more about police accountability and insightful legal analysis, head over to the Review the Audit channel. We have a ton of great content for you there. Now, let's get back to this Florida case. What happens after Hodges criticizes the officers? Do they actually arrest him?
Yes, they do. And the lawyer argues that this arrest might have been unlawful. This is where we step into the concept of false arrest.
Hold on. False arrest. Tell me more about that.
So a false arrest is basically a violation of that Fourth Amendment protection we talked about earlier, the one that protects us from unreasonable search and seizure. The lawyer contends that the arrest was unlawful because the officers didn't have probable cause to arrest Hodges in the first place. Their suspicion had evaporated, and there was no legal basis to continue detaining him, let alone arrest him.
So just to be clear, The lawyer's saying the officers might have arrested Hodges as a form of retaliation for his criticism, and not because they had a legitimate legal reason to do so.
Exactly. And to make matters even more complex, there's another legal concept at play here, one that is specific to Florida: the right to resist an unlawful arrest. That's right. It's based on a Florida case from 2003, Macon versus State. And you're not going to believe this. That case established that individuals in Florida have the legal right to resist an arrest if they believe it's unlawful.
Wait, hold on. Are you serious? You can legally resist arrest in Florida. That seems pretty radical.
It is a pretty powerful legal principle. Of course, there's a catch. The resistance has to be nonviolent. It essentially highlights the importance of individual rights, even when dealing with law enforcement. It's like the law is saying, we trust citizens to know their rights and stand up for themselves if they're being wrongly detained.
So in this case, if Hodges genuinely believed his arrest was unlawful, he had the legal right to resist as long as he didn't use any violence.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky. The video footage doesn't clearly show Hodges using any violence, but the officers claim he resisted arrest. This raises the question of whether the officer's perception of resistance was influenced by Hodges' earlier criticism, adding another layer to the potential retaliatory motive argument.
Wow, it's like a legal domino effect. From a simple misunderstanding about a cane, we're now grappling with reasonable suspicion. The Second Amendment, the First Amendment, false arrest, and even the right to resist arrest. It really shows how crucial it is to understand your rights, especially during interactions with law enforcement.
Absolutely. It's about knowing when to assert those rights and how to do so effectively. This case is a powerful reminder that knowledge really is power, especially when it comes to navigating complex legal situations.
So let's recap for our listeners. We started with a legally blind man walking home with a cane that a police officer mistook for a gun. We then explored the concept of reasonable suspicion and how Florida's open carry laws add a layer of complexity to these situations.
We then saw how the encounter escalated when Hodges exercised his First Amendment right to free speech by criticizing the officers, potentially triggering a retaliatory response in the form of an arrest.
And finally, we delved into the legal concepts of false arrest and the right to resist unlawful arrest in Florida, highlighting how these concepts might apply to Hodges' situation. It's a lot to unpack, but it's all interconnected and incredibly relevant, especially in today's world.
It truly emphasizes the importance of staying informed and engaged with these issues.
Couldn't agree more. For our listeners who want to stay ahead of the curve and explore similar cases in legal analysis, be sure to check out the Review the Audit channel. We're dedicated to breaking down complex legal issues into digestible insights that empower you to understand your rights and navigate these situations effectively.
Now, where were we? Yes. We were discussing Hodges' arrest. What happened after that?
Well, according to the lawyer, there are several potential legal avenues Hodges could pursue following his arrest.
Let's dive into those. But first, let's take a step back and really address the big so what question for our listener.
Good point. We've covered a lot of legal ground here. But what are the broader implications of this case? Why should our listener care about what happened to Jim Hodges in Florida?
This case isn't just about one man's encounter with the police. It raises some fundamental questions about police conduct, the balance between public safety and individual rights, and the potential for abuse of power. It's about ensuring that law enforcement operates within the boundaries of the law, and that citizens understand and can assert their rights when necessary.
So for our listener, this case isn't just a legal drama unfolding in Florida. It's a reminder that these issues can happen anywhere, to anyone. It's a call to understand your rights and to know what to do if you find yourself in a similar situation.
Exactly. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and understanding so we can navigate these complex situations effectively and advocate for our rights and the rights of others.
It also makes you think about the chilling effect this kind of situation could have on free speech. If people are afraid to speak up or criticize law enforcement for fear of retaliation, that's a real problem for a democratic society.
Absolutely. The First Amendment is there to protect our right to criticize those in power. And that includes law enforcement. If we lose that ability, we lose a vital check on government authority.
So what happens next in this case? What are Hodges' options from a legal standpoint?
Well, according to the lawyer, there are several legal avenues Hodges could pursue. One option would be to file a civil lawsuit against the officers, and possibly the police department for false arrest, violation of his civil rights, and possibly even malicious prosecution. He could also file a formal complaint with the police department's Internal Affairs Division, or with a citizen review board if one exists in his area.
That makes sense. He could seek some form of accountability through the legal system and try to get some justice for what happened.
Exactly. And beyond the legal options, there's also the court of public opinion. This case has already generated a lot of attention online and in the media. By speaking out and sharing his story, Hodges is raising awareness about these important issues and hopefully prompting some much-needed dialogue about police conduct and citizens' rights.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a voice and that we can use it to advocate for change, whether it's through legal channels, social media, or simply having conversations with our friends and family. We can all play a role in shaping a more just and equitable society.
Couldn't agree more. This case is a perfect illustration of how individual stories can spark broader conversations and even lead to systemic change.
So, for our listener, we encourage you to really think critically about what we've discussed today. What does this case say about the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve? What role does free speech play in holding power accountable? And how can we ensure that individual rights are protected, even in tense and challenging situations?
These are crucial questions that deserve our attention. And if you're interested in exploring these issues further and learning more about your rights and how to exercise them, we highly recommend checking out the Civil Rights Lawyer channel on YouTube. They offer a wealth of information and insightful legal analysis on a wide range of topics.
Great advice. We've only scratched the surface today, but hopefully this deep dive has been helpful and informative. It's clear this case has layers of legal nuances and raises some fundamental questions about our society. It's crucial we understand these issues, not only for our own protection, but also for the health of our society as a whole.
Well said. Knowledge is power. And the more we understand these complex issues, the better equipped we are to advocate for positive change.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. On the Review the Audit channel, we encourage you to stay engaged, keep learning, and never be afraid to speak up for what you believe in.